Here, little bird. Try not to get a splinter from this 1 inch. The words, slick with condescending amusement, cut through the oppressive heat of the Nevada desert training ground. Sergeant Drake, an instructor whose neck was as thick as his certainty, tossed a length of rope at the feet of the smallest candidate. It wasn't standard issue climbing rope. It was a frayed, sun-bleached remnant, something you'd use to tie down a flapping tarp, not trust with a human life. A ripple of sycophantic laughter spread through the ranks of the other trainees, a collection of burly, sun-scorched men who saw the sergeant's casual cruelty as a form of strength. They looked at the woman, Specialist Anna Morgan, and saw what Drake saw: a clerical error, a misplaced analyst with mousy brown hair tied back in a severe, functional bun, and glasses that seemed too large for her face. She was small, compact, and utterly still. But as the laughter subsided, she did nothing. She didn't flush with anger or embarrassment. She didn't protest the injustice. She simply bent down with an economy of motion, picked up the pathetic rope, and began coiling it with methodical precision, her fingers testing the worn fibers, her gaze distant and analytical. From the shaded overlook 100 yards away, the course commandant, Colonel Evans, lowered his binoculars. He hadn't seen her face, but he saw her hands. He saw the way she held the rope, not as a victim, but as a professional assessing a tool. A strange, forgotten memory flickered in the back of his mind. If you believe that true strength is measured in silence, type competence below. Sergeant Drake was a monument to a fading era of military thinking, a man who equated decibels with authority and muscle mass with capability. He saw the military as a simple machine of force, and he was a finely honed, if blunt, cog within it. In his mind, the modern influx of cerebral, technical specialists was a dilution of the warrior ethos. He looked at Specialist Morgan and saw the embodiment of this perceived decay. She was quiet, she was slight, and she was female. He had made it his personal mission during this advanced seer course, a brutal crucible known colloquially as Reaper's Gauntlet, to weed out those he deemed unfit, to break them before they could fail in the field. His public humiliation of Morgan was not just a spontaneous act of malice. It was a calculated part of his philosophy, a stress test designed to expose weakness. But her silence was a variable he couldn't compute. It wasn't the fearful silence of the intimidated, nor the resentful silence of the insubordinate. It was a profound, unnerving calm, a quiet professionalism that absorbed his insults without a single ripple. As the other candidates shuffled their feet, creating a subtle distance from her, as if her weakness were contagious, she continued her work. She checked the simple gear she'd been issued, her movements fluid and practiced, each action flowing into the next with a purpose that seemed to emanate from a place of deep training. Her focus was absolute, a silent rebuke to the chaos and arrogance surrounding her. Drake saw a mouse. Colonel Evans, watching from his perch, began to suspect he was looking at a viper, perfectly camouflaged and waiting. The gauntlet began with a punishing trek through miles of jagged, unforgiving terrain under a relentless sun. It was a test of endurance and navigation, designed to fray nerves and exhaust the body before the real challenges even began. The larger, more boastful candidates sprinted ahead, eager to prove their physical dominance, only to make critical navigational errors, wasting precious energy backtracking through thorny scrub and rocky washes. Sergeant Drake's voice crackled over the radios, a constant stream of mockery and pressure. Specialist Morgan, however, moved with a different rhythm. Her pace was deliberate, almost unnaturally steady, a ground-eating stride that was the epitome of energy conservation. While others fought the landscape, she seemed to flow through it, her eyes constantly scanning, processing, analyzing. She was not just walking. She was reading the story of the land, using subtle shifts in vegetation and the angle of the sun as tools more reliable than any compass. Hours later, when the exhausted candidates finally reached the final obstacle, a deep, 50-foot ravine known as Widow's Leap, their bravado had been baked out of them. This was the true test. A single steel cable spanned the chasm. The task was to get across with their gear. It was a test of strength, skill, and courage. As the others fumbled with their standard-issue ropes and harnesses, their hands shaky with fatigue, Morgan found a secluded spot. She laid out the frayed rope Drake had given her. Then she produced items she had gathered during her walk: long, fibrous yucca leaves, thin but tough strips of bark from a juniper tree, and a small, hard stone. Her hands began to work, not with haste, but with the serene, focused grace of a master craftsman. The air at Widow's Leap was thick with tension and the grunts of exertion. The first candidate, a massive infantryman who had been among the loudest to laugh at Morgan, stalled halfway across. His arms, corded with muscle, began to tremble, his grip failing. He was forced into a humiliating retreat. Another dropped a critical piece of equipment, watching it vanish into the shadows of the ravine below. Sergeant Drake paced the edge, his voice a torrent of corrosive insults, his frustration mounting with each failure. "Is this the best you've got? My grandmother could do better," he roared. Then, the shouting stopped. All eyes turned to Morgan. She was approaching the anchor point, not with the frayed rope, but with the thing she had created from it. It was a marvel of field expedient engineering. She had painstakingly separated the few intact core strands of the original rope and used them as a central thread. Around this, she had braided the tough yucca fibers, creating a new, thicker line. The juniper bark was woven in at key points to prevent friction wear, and the whole construction was cinched tight with a series of complex, interlocking knots that no one recognized. From the hard stone and a carved piece of wood, she had fashioned a crude but effective tensioning device. It was a tool born of pure intellect and skill. She attached it to the cable, not with a grunt of effort, but with a quiet click. Her crossing was breathtaking. It was not a display of raw power, but of perfect balance and technique. She moved like a spider on a web, fluid and certain. When her boots touched the far side, a deafening silence fell over the ravine, broken only by the whisper of the wind. Drake stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, the insults dead on his lips. His certainty had just been obliterated by a quiet woman and a piece of trash. Colonel Evans moved with the quiet purpose of a man accustomed to command. He descended from his observation post, his boots making little sound on the gravel path. The candidates parted for him instinctively, their awe at Morgan's feat now mixed with a new apprehension at the arrival of the commandant. Evans ignored them. He walked past a stunned and speechless Sergeant Drake and went directly to the near-side anchor point of the ravine crossing. His eyes were not on Morgan, who was now methodically securing her gear on the other side, but on the incredible device she had left behind. He ran a hand over the intricate braiding, feeling the tension in the yucca fibers. Then he stopped, his fingers tracing the lines of a particular knot near the toggle. It was a modified double fisherman's bend, but with a third, interlocking loop that distributed the load in a unique way. It was a knot designed for one specific, esoteric purpose: securing a static line in the violent prop wash of a low-altitude extraction. He hadn't seen it in 15 years. The memory became crystal clear: a darkened sea, 1:30, the ramp down, the roar of the engines, and a young pararescueman, a PJ, showing him how to tie it, explaining that it would hold even if 2 of the 3 loops were severed. It was a signature, more telling than any name tag. He looked across the chasm at the small, unassuming specialist. He saw her now not as a candidate, but as a peer, a quiet professional of the highest possible caliber. The pieces of the puzzle didn't just click into place. They formed a picture of profound and decorated competence he had failed to see. The colonel's voice was calm, yet it seemed to suck the very air out of the space around it. "Sergeant Drake, with me?" He didn't wait for a reply, turning his attention to the ruggedized tablet in his hand. Drake approached, his face pale, his earlier arrogance replaced by a rigid, fearful obedience. The colonel tapped the screen a few times, his movements precise, before holding the tablet out for Drake to see. "Access the personnel file for Specialist Anna Morgan. Read it." Aloud, Drake's hands trembled slightly as he took the device. The screen glowed with the stark, blocky text of a military record. He began to read, his voice barely a whisper at first, then growing more strained with each word. "Name: Morgan, Anna C. Unit." He paused, swallowing hard. "Unit: 24th Special Tactics Squadron." A collective gasp went through the nearby candidates who heard. "Tier 1. The best of the best." Drake continued, his voice cracking. "Primary AFSC. Combat Control. Qualifications: Static Line Jump Master, Military Freefall, Combat Diver, Air traffic control, joint terminal attack controller. He fell silent, staring at the screen. The rest, Sergeant, the colonel prompted, his voice like ice. Deployments, Drake stammered, classified. Awards, Bronze Star with Valor, 3 oak leaf clusters. Purple Heart, Air Force. He couldn't finish the sentence. The words wouldn't come out. The colonel took the tablet. Air Force Cross. He finished, his voice ringing with authority. He looked up from the screen, his gaze sweeping over the assembled soldiers before landing on Drake. Then, he turned and faced the other side of the ravine. He drew himself up to his full height, his back ramrod straight, and rendered a slow, perfect salute to the quiet specialist across the gap. It was a gesture of profound respect, an apology, and a coronation, all in one silent motion. The story of Morgan's crossing became legend before the sun had even set. It traveled on whispers, carried from the training ground to the mess halls, from the barracks to the command building. It was a story too good, too pure, to remain contained. By the next morning, everyone on the base knew about the quiet specialist who had silenced the infamous Sergeant Drake with a piece of frayed rope and an impossible knot. The details, as they always do, began to morph and grow with each telling. Some versions had her weaving the rope from sunlight and sheer willpower. Others claimed the colonel had knelt before her. But the core of the story, the central truth of it, remained intact, quiet. Unassuming competence had faced down loud, arrogant prejudice, and had won an absolute victory. A new kind of respect began to follow Morgan. It wasn't the backslapping camaraderie offered to the other men. It was something deeper, more reverent. People made way for her. They spoke in quieter tones when she was near. They looked at her not with pity or condescension, but with a mixture of awe and a little bit of fear. She was an enigma, a living testament to the fact that the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal is a well-trained mind. The legend wasn't just about her skill. It was a moral lesson for the entire institution, a powerful reminder that assumptions are a luxury that no soldier, no leader, can ever afford. Her silence was no longer seen as weakness. It was understood to be the profound calm of a master who had nothing left to prove. Sergeant Drake did not appear for duty the next morning. His absence was noted, and rumors began to fly that he had been formally disciplined, perhaps even removed from his instructor post. But late that afternoon, he found Specialist Morgan as she was cleaning her equipment, preparing for the next phase of the course. He looked like a different man. The swagger was gone, the abrasive certainty replaced by a heavy, somber humility. He stood before her, not looming over her as he had before, but standing at a respectful distance, his hands clasped behind his back. The other candidates in the vicinity fell silent, watching the unfolding drama. Drake cleared his throat. Specialist Morgan, he began, his voice low and devoid of its usual gravelly bark. I was wrong. My conduct yesterday was unprofessional, and my judgment was flawed. I failed you as an instructor, and I failed this institution. I apologize. It was a simple, direct admission, stripped of any excuse or justification. Morgan paused her work, looking up at him. She gave a single, small nod of acknowledgement. Drake hesitated for a moment, then took a breath. That nod, he said, the question clear in his voice even without the words. The techniques you used. I have never seen anything like it. He was not just apologizing. He was admitting his own ignorance, a far more difficult act for a man like him. Will you teach me? It was the ultimate concession, the final, shattering blow to his own ego. And in that moment, Anna Morgan, the quiet professional, gave him the answer that would begin his redemption. Yes, Sergeant, she said simply. I can show you. A year later, the view from Widow's Leap was the same, but the lesson was profoundly different. Sergeant Drake stood before a new class of SEER candidates, their faces a mixture of anxiety and determination. In his hand, he held a frayed, sun-bleached piece of rope. This, he began, his voice now measured and thoughtful, is the most important piece of equipment you will handle at this school. It looks like trash. It feels worthless. And a year ago, I gave a rope just like this to a candidate as an insult. He paused, letting the weight of his admission settle over the new trainees. He told them the story of Specialist Anna Morgan. He did not spare himself in the telling, detailing his own arrogance, his own blind prejudice, with brutal honesty. He used his own failure as the ultimate teaching tool. The ravine crossing was now officially called the Morgan Crossing, and the curriculum had been fundamentally changed. An entire new block of instruction, field expedient innovation, had been added, its lesson plans personally drafted and approved by Specialist Morgan before she had departed for another undisclosed assignment. In the main instruction hall of the Sears School, a simple wooden plaque now hung on the wall. Mounted on it was the very rope Morgan had used, its intricate knots and yucca fiber braids preserved. Beneath it, a small brass plate was engraved with a simple, powerful maxim. Assumptions are heavier than any burden. The story was no longer just a piece of gossip. It had become doctrine, a foundational piece of institutional wisdom, ensuring that the lesson learned in a moment of humiliation would echo for a generation of soldiers. True strength is rarely found in the thunder of a boast or the flash of a medal. It resides in the quiet places, in the calm, steady hands of the professional who has honed their craft in crucibles we can only imagine. It is a force that does not require announcement, for its results speak a universal language of competence that silences all doubt and demolishes all prejudice. The legacy of Specialist Anna Morgan was not etched in stone or recorded in the official histories that are available for public consumption. Her greatest achievements remain shrouded in the necessary secrecy that protects a nation. But her true legacy, the one that continues to propagate and grow, is found in the mind of an instructor who learned humility, in a curriculum that now values intellect as much as muscle, and in the story told to every new student who stands at the edge of a ravine and learns to see potential where others see only trash. It is a living legacy, a testament to the enduring power of action over words, of precision over posture, of respect that is earned in silence and given in awe. Her story reminds us that the most formidable people are often the ones you overlook, the quiet professionals who carry the weight of the world without complaint, proving their worth not with what they say, but with what they do. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud ignorance, and where professional skill defines true worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.